So I'm not going to hold you very long. I want to talk to you really quickly about something that blesses me, and that something is apostolic relationships. More appropriately, I'm going to be talking about Paul and Timothy. Paul and Timothy. So if you have shared this already, thank you so kindly. If you're going to share it, thank you so very much. I want to invite you to do it. I'm always excited about first-time visitors to my Periscope, so thank you so much. Dr. Jill Joe, I see you in here. I see you. Thank you so much for sharing. You guys are amazing. All right, Elder Moore, hey, good to see you. Dirk Thurston, good to see you. Hey, I'm a Thurston as well, so we might be related. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but I am definitely a Thurston by my maternal family. Okay, I want to talk to you real quick about one of the aspects of apostolic leadership that I think is under assault, and I think that is under attack, and that I think that is something that we've got to really evaluate. And a lot of the talk and a lot of the hoopla about apostles and community and all that stuff. And one of the things that I think is underemphasized when we talk about apostolic leadership is the power in the relationships they create. I think encounter is an important part of apostleship. I think nations, I think sons, I think warfare, I think deliverance, I think miracles, church planting, leaders, etc. But one of the missing pieces to one of the dimensions of an apostolic leader is their ability to forge purposeful and destiny relationships. It's being relational. It's a byproduct of their encounters with God and a part of what God does in the life of somebody who is a leader and that is apostolic. And I am always amazed at how the Apostle Paul, for example, was able to pioneer new truth, was able to reform people's ideals of church, was able to present us with an understanding of the kingdom, was able to move in miracles. Hold on. That's better. Was able to do amazing things. I mean, the Apostle Paul, he's a pattern of apostolic ministry. But one of the things that blesses me about the Apostle Paul is his ability to forge relationships that unlocked destiny. And my favorite relationship of the Apostle Paul, he has some very unique engagement, peer-wise, in his apostolic colleagues, those that also had apostolic careers. That was unique, when you find out what he did with John Mark, and you find out how he related to Peter and all of that stuff. It's very interesting. But what I like studying about the Apostle Paul is how he related to Timothy and how Timothy affected him. If you study Paul's epistles or letters to Timothy, they're so unique, they're so beautiful, they're so powerful, but they also show you one of the aspects and aims of his apostolic calling. And but I'm going to give you something you probably did not know about Paul's relationship with Timothy. Now, number one, if you gather historical data about Paul and Timothy's relationship, you don't exactly know when they met. You don't know what the circumstances were behind their meeting, but you do see a couple of things. And I'm not saying that this is a template for anything. I'm just saying that this is a relationship that really blesses me. Number one, you find that Timothy was a man who was raised by his mother and also by his grandmother, Lois and Eunice. You find out that they were, good evening, revolving floor. You find that Paul acknowledged Timothy's mother and grandmother in his letters to them, and their godliness and their consistency in the faith, their steadfastness in God, etc., etc. And so you find that there was mention, there was discussion about the women in Timothy's life, but you don't necessarily see or know that there was a man in Timothy's life. You don't really find out what they talked about it. So as far as what we know in the biblical writ, Timothy probably did not have a healthy or a consistent or an involved relationship with his dad, because he's not really mentioned. And but so you see, you kind of introduce their relationship in the epistles of Timothy, and he kind of just appears. And then in one of the Corinthian epistles, he's suggesting how Timothy is to be received. But you don't really get to see the heart of Paul towards Timothy until you look in the book of Acts. Now, so this is so interesting. If you review the Pauline epistles, those that he wrote to Timothy, you see some tone of their relationships, but my favorite is in Acts chapter 16. This is a beautiful story. Paul had to have met, discerned, and started to disciple Timothy from a very, very, very premature, immature phase. Okay, and what I mean by that is that Paul had to have seen something in Timothy that was not evident, visible, or obvious. It's extremely important to know. One of the earmarks of an apostolic leader is going to be their ability to decipher things while they are in seed form. One of the strengths of their mantles is going to be revelation. And so that's not just from God, but it's also going to be about people concerning their destiny and where they're going. So Timothy clearly could not have looked like what he was going to look like as a byproduct of his engagement and interaction with the Apostle Paul. But what I love this, that Acts 16 has a story about how Paul was going to take Timothy with him, which means that one of Paul's philosophies of ministry was on-the-job training. If he said that you were a son or a disciple of his, he did not just entreat you by letter and literature. The way he cultivated you was by taking you with him to show you how he did what he did. I've embraced that. I implore that. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe that if you're going to call yourself a disciple maker or a father or whatever your particular designation is going to be, I think that there needs to be some degree of on-the-job training where people get to observe your life, your ministry, how you handle pressure, how you handle platform, how you handle people. And we see that in Acts chapter 16. Paul did something very, very, very unique. And I know many of you probably looked over this story, but I encourage you to go and revisit it. In Acts 16, the Bible says that Paul was getting ready to take on a typical itinerant journey to some traditional Jews, and he wanted the Jews to receive Timothy. And he wanted Timothy to be respected, heard. He wanted him to be revered in the same way he would be revered. So a part of what Paul did in Acts 16 verse 3 was circumcise Timothy so as to make sure he would be received because of the Jews. Now, that may be something that is insignificant to you and something that doesn't really mean a lot to you. But I want you to see the extremities and the extent that Paul went to make sure that Timothy was not reproached. His first action, as far as what we know, was to circumcise Timothy. In other words, Paul went out of his way to let him know that it really wasn't about the circumcision of the skin anyway. It was always about the circumcision of the heart. So in Paul's personal preferences, Timothy probably could have gone without literal circumcision and still been as anointed as he was. But what Paul did to Timothy was circumcise him physically so that his calling would not be compromised and so that his destiny would not be reproached by people having anything against him, by people using the fact that he was not circumcised to ignore him. So what Paul did as his first act of fathering was not a hug. It wasn't an embrace, so to speak. It wasn't a invitation. It was a knife. It was a knife, guys. Paul's first display of affection to Timothy was the loving hold of a knife in his hand. Isn't that interesting? He cut this man. He literally cut him and circumcised him so that he could be received. This gives us a very unique lesson if we're going to use the term apostolic fathering or parenting, or if we're going to use the term mentoring, or if we're going to use the term discipleship, whatever we're going to use. We're going to see that Paul's idea of making a person ready for destiny before the affirmation came, the circumcision was there. Paul cut him. And the reason Paul cut him was so that he would be received. He wanted to make sure that he dealt with reproach, and that was unnecessary for where Timothy was going to go in his future. Now, Acts 16 is before Paul got imprisoned. It was before he had to write letters. So they were very much still engaging person to person. And while they were engaging, the rest of his instructions came via letter. But this engagement was actually physical, which shows a priority of the Apostle Paul to Timothy, which was, if I don't circumcise you, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be scandal. There may even be rumor. There will be the unnecessary scandalion talk about who you are and what you have to say. So Paul's concern at this juncture in Acts 16:3 was not just Timothy's message, was not just Timothy's presentation, it was not just Timothy's look. It was whether or not the Jews would have anything against him, which shows that the heart of Paul, the Father heart of God in Paul, actually embraced a knife. And that was his act of affection. And I believe that one cut is what tied them for the duration of the Pauline epistles. So after Paul circumcised him, he developed the right to tell the Corinthian church, it's beautiful, to tell the Corinthian church, receive Timothy, for I know nobody else in like spirit as me. He said that legitimately. He said, receive him. Then in another word, he told Timothy, he told the other ones that were comparing themselves to Timothy, he said, Timothy is a true son in the faith, as one that has labored with me as a father. So why was Paul so certain in Timothy's productivity, in Timothy's ability to produce, his likelihood? Why was Timothy so licensed, bonded, and insured? Why was Paul so thorough in the instructions of Timothy about how to set leaders in place? And why did Paul do so much reminding? Neglect not the gift, he says in Timothy, that was placed in you by the laying on of my hands and by the presbytery. And he tells him again, stir up the gift of God that is in you by the laying on of my hands. Fan into flame the gift of God, or God has not given you a spirit of fear, but a power and a love and of time. He gives Timothy a lot of instructions, but I believe the beginning place of their interaction of that tone was Acts 16:3, where Paul knew that God was taking Timothy where he did not know he was going. Now, Timothy has some naiveties. He probably had some expectations. He probably had some ideas of what ministry to the Jews would be like. Remember, Timothy was actually an evangelistic apostle. He was set and referred to in biblical tandems, us and we amongst the apostles. But Paul actually told Timothy, do the work of an evangelist, which means he was probably an apostle who had a very powerful evangelistic thrust, but which means that he was a zealot. He had revival in him. He wanted to confront. He was probably doing what he saw. Now, this means that Paul caught Timothy early on in life, before other people started reaching for him, and before he became brandable, and before he became marketable, and all of that stuff. You got to be very careful about embracing relationships that are only interested in you when you already appear like what you're going to be. When you get popularity, when you get platform, when you start to get influence, every relationship you have is now going to be a bit more complicated, because you're going to always question, who are you, what do you want, and why are you here now? I cannot tell you how many relatives, how many friends, how many well-wishers and supporters I now have, when I don't, frankly, need them as bad as I did about 11 years ago. And people have the audacity to be offended when you accurately define their relationship, like, oh, you always knew I would make it. That's odd. I don't ever remember you hearing that before other people start agreeing. Anywho, but that was a very important part of the Apostle Paul, was his ability to identify what was in Timothy before Timothy looked like Timothy. And you need relationships in your world that are not intimidated by the fact that you are undone. Now, I know it's too late to be preaching like this. I'm just giving you some insight. You need some people that are willing to invest in you, make time for you, and see what's in you before you have developed a full cognizance about what's in you yourself. So, you've got to be open to taking the risk, to exposing your heart and exposing your life and exposing your soul to vessels who see what's in you before you fully recognize it yourself and before you can even fully handle it yourself. That's the beauty of the Paul-Timothy dynamic. I don't think that it is literally, I don't think it's a age thing. I don't think that it's a genealogical thing. I don't think it's a race thing. I don't think it's an economic thing. I think it's a thing of the Father heart of God operative through our talking sonship talk. It actually scares you because you're more comfortable with actually being a massa Christian and ironing robes and washing cars and getting draws out the cleaners and carry it on because you think that's the way to your inheritance. Now, I'm not saying don't serve your leaders. I think you should serve your leaders. There's a blessing in serving your leaders. Every leader needs men and women that will serve them, but that can't be the extent of the relationship that you emphasis, and that your marriage is falling apart and that your sexual character is out of order, and that there are other things that can reproach where you're going. I mean, there's a lot of you who say you were sons to people and all they did was give you a collar and a certificate and sent you on your way and told you good luck. But what happens beyond the collar, beyond the consecration? What happens beyond that is ending that's going to help you go where you need to go in life and in destiny. If you find a person, a mentor, a teacher, a counselor, a father, and they are disinterested in your deliverance, they are in fact a fraud. A fraud. F-R-A-U-D. A fraud. A father, mentor, mother, coach who has what if they don't believe in deliverance? Then you shouldn't believe in them. Yeah, so if you are a Timothy and you are in one of them in the mean in between times, believe of the Lord to make you more teachable, and the level of your authority is going to be determined by your level of teachability. There is a biblical relationship between authority and teachability. Jesus never gave authority to people he couldn't teach. When he transferred authority, it was not because they deserved it. It was because of what he was able to teach them. And the problem is a lot of us who want authority beyond our teachability level. But what qualifies you for authority is the fact that you have been taught. If you think about the way authority is delegated around the world, and it's based upon what you learn. You don't get authority just because you look like you need it or just because you're talented. You get authority based upon how you pass or fail lessons. When Jesus it was certain that the disciples had come to a height in their lessons and in their catechism and in the discipleship, he then gave them the authority that was given to him. So this is why authority is not one of those things that can be snatched. It must be given. And some of you are carrying water and toting Bibles and cleaning cars and getting boxers and drawers and panties and bras out to cleaners and wiping faces and all that stuff. And you're not being taught. And you think that that water carrying and that mint carrying is going to be your way into a new level of authority. And it's deception. Now, serve your leaders. Don't leave here thinking that I'm telling you don't serve your leaders. Please, pour water on the hands of the one that God called you to. If you're smart, you're going to serve. So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you're going to do all of that and never have your life addressed, never have your foreskin addressed, then you have found a fraud and not a father. And this is why Paul obviously could not have been a very, very, very easily impressed person, because he had to look for what was going to reproach Timothy. So that means he couldn't spend the majority of his time being impressed and being a talent recruiter. Some of us have mistaken real fathers and mothers for talent scouts. And it's something we've got to be very, 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 very interested in, because it grieves me how many leaders go without it, and it grieves me how many church planters go without it, how many really anointed guys are submitted to dude who were talent recruiters, career scouts, and not necessarily fathers who have an eye for things that could. Paul and Timothy had a very, very, very beautiful relationship, unique, rare, but very necessary. I know that there's a lot of freezing going on in here, and Periscope is kicking you out, but go back and rewatch this and see if it bless you. But this is so important. It's so important. If no one exists, won't God teach me himself? Absolutely, under no circumstance, because you'd be so full of pride you wouldn't be useful to God. So God is never going to teach you everything you know by himself, because teaching you through human beings is how he keeps you connected to the body. Knowledge puffeth up, and if all your life lessons came from heaven, you would be full of Leviathan and control. So unfortunately, no ma'am, God is not going to teach you by himself. You need to submit to somebody. So, yeah, that's my prayer for you. I feel this, and go back and read this, but I'm concerned about how many apostles got seals and collars and scepters and no sons. Laughable. So, yeah, I want you to go back, review this, watch this, but that's my prayer. That those of you that are Pauls would be Pauls. Those of you that are Timothys would be Timothys. You need to learn honor. You need to learn posture. You need to learn commitment. You need to learn transparency. You need to learn all of that stuff. But it's time for you to find your Paul. It's time for you to be your Timothy. Now, if you are sitting in a church that has like 5,000 people, don't you dare have a fit, because you can get a personal audience with the main dude that's preaching every day. Humble yourself. Black people are crazy. They think that they get entitlements. They come into a church, I need to see my pastor. It's 20,000 of y'all. And in a church of 20,000 people, you at least got 200 leaders that can do what the set man does. If you don't get that old control, democratic stuff on up out of here and find some, see what, you don't need help. You want attention. There is a difference, because if you're hungry, around here, my kids will be like, Daddy, I'm hungry. Daddy, I'm hungry. After they've had a whole plate of food that they refuse to eat. What the real truth is, they were not hungry. What they really wanted was junk, and what they really wanted was what they wanted to eat. But they're not really hungry, because we are disinterested in that. I don't care who's offended by it. So, no. If a church is 10,000 members strong, you should probably have at least 1,000 pastoral figures, at least. Now, I know that's a lot. Because, we got a superhero mentality. But whatever, you can't legitimately have a Paul-Timothy relationship and not have people touching people in some form or another. So this is my burden tonight. We need to see a lot more of this in the body of Christ. And I'm praying for those of you who are without this, those of you who desire this, especially those of you who don't just want to be regular Christians. Like, if you just want to be a Christian, then you don't really need this. What you need is a disciple, or somebody who's going to teach you how to stay out of sin, help you maintain your deliverance, help you learn things about destiny. But if you are one of those who are interested in your assignment, you are willing to live self-sacrificially, and you're not normal, there's more to you than meets the eye, and you're called to ministry, my prayer for you is that God sends you your Paul, that he reveals your Paul, that he unveils your Paul, that he shows you your Paul. But I'll leave it up. I'm praying for you. I'm grieved about this. And I'm going to be very transparent with you. Why am I being so transparent? When you build a church, Prophet Kevin, hey man, I love you, sir. And to be very honest with you, he's on here. I want all of you on here, go follow Prophet Kevin Leo. Kevin Leo and Greg House taught me discipleship. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that to be braggadocious. I don't say that to be inflammatory. I was doing it before I had a language for it. I was doing it, and to be very frankly, it hadn't really been done to me. I was doing it. We started our church 12 years ago doing it, giving people opportunity to do things, training people. Kevin, Lil, and Greg House set me down after a series of encounters and taught me the power of intimate environments to pour into people legitimately, and I owe them that. They taught me discipleship. And to be very, here's my transparent moment. It takes you longer when you do it the right way. I used to grieve probably years 1 through 5 about why my church wasn't growing the rate I wanted it to. And there would be people that would start off by, January, and by April, they would have 10,000 people and 20,000 people. His name is Prophet Kevin Leal, Leal. Go follow him right now. All of you. But when you do it right, God takes you the long route. I had to learn how to build people. And when I committed to build people, God committed to build my buildings. I've never lacked in buildings because I've been a person that built people. And so, yeah, that's very important. There he goes right there, Prophet Kevin Leal. Go follow him right now. But he's a part of why I know discipleship. He taught me that. He imparted that to my church and to my life. So because we did it right, it took us longer. People that do it wrong get it done a lot faster. So because I made the mistake of actually caring about people, I wasn't able to get 10,000 in 2 years because I didn't just see them as numbers and carrying on. So this apostolic relationship thing is so important. Every Timothy needs a Paul. Every Paul needs a Timothy. And yeah, I'm praying about this. I'm grieved about it. But I want this to become a part of every church culture. It's a part of my church culture. And I want it to become a part of yours. So I'm praying for you. Adrian Davis, you're living this. I love you so much. Adrian Davis is a byproduct of this, and he's doing it. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do because you can't. I'm going to tell you why most preachers can't do this. Most preachers are, preachers are not really afraid of a lot. But one of the things that preachers are really afraid of is people becoming familiar with them. They have such a fear of people seeing them hurt, of people seeing them cry, of people see them as a husband. They really only want to be seen behind the pulpits. So because of that, that's their paradigm for fathering. When I preach, I'm fathering. When I open my Bible and take my text and I give you the religious Darth Vader voice, that's when I'm fathering. But my sons and daughters have seen me walk through crazy stuff, betrayal, hurt, the murder of my natural father. I mean, I bled in front of them, and they watched me recuperate, and they watched me restore. And so, but here's my experience. If I wasn't worried about who was going to become familiar, because if people became familiar with the rest, you just give them a harsh rebuke. You don't run from that stuff, but you can't be afraid to allow them to see how the man wears the mantle. It's too late to do this type of preaching. I'm going to bed. You know what I'm saying? What gives them respect for the mantle is the fact that they see it on the man. You preachers are so scared of people realizing that you are a human being. You know what I'm saying? That you won't really make real sons. You're making religious robots. But nobody have soldiers if they don't have sons. And nobody have sons if they're scared to be a man. Well, with that said, I'm going to conclude this. But this is important, and to be very honest, my opinion is that my church will probably be, to God be the glory. We are in the 1,000 range, probably at about 1,500 right now, and to God be the glory. But we would probably be a lot bigger if I didn't care about people. If I only cared about numbers and productions and stuff like that, we'd probably be a lot bigger. But I actually do things, and I actually invest in things that matter to people, and because of it, God is taking us and has taken us the long route. A lot of people are like, where did you come from? I'm like, if I hear, I've been around for a minute, pushing in the sheepfold. Y'all just learned about me. I mean, my church I've been preaching since 99. It's 2016, man, almost 17 years. And pastoring 12 of those 17. So because of that, it's just that there's a moment that's unlocked, but we've definitely went the long route. And I'm cool with it. I'm resolved about it. I'm okay that God has taken his time with me because I want to do it the way God wants me to do it. And I feel like this Paul Timothy thing is going to be what convicts me and what keeps me in my commitment to God and what he called me to do. Blah, blah, blah. I ranted. But yeah, study Acts 16:3. Paul cut Timothy, and that was the birth of their relationship, and that was the birth of where they were going, and that actually earned him the right to say and do everything he said and did in the Pauline epistles to him. So that's very, very, very important. I bid you peace tonight in the precious name of Jesus. Something is taking place in this season of the body of Christ. Don't be dismayed. Don't fret. God is actually up to so much in this moment in history. You pastors that are looking for context and covering, my heart goes out to you. I'm praying for you. And I'm really believing God to connect you with the leader that you need to help you get to your future. And you leaders that are too afraid and too wounded and you are bleeding to death because of sheep bites and you're too hurt to father, I pray that you recover your strength and recover your value for people, because people matter over paperwork and people matter over programs. Don't you ever put programs and paperwork before people, or else you're going to run the risk of losing your authority. Authority flows relationally, and I'm not saying that's the only thing you should do, but you got to do it for somebody. Jesus had the 3, he had the 12, and then he had the 70, and then he had the masses. I'm not telling you to give yourself to the masses. The masses need your message, but the 12 need your manhood. All right, the Lord bless and keep you. Pray for me. I'm in an awesome series. I'll Periscope to you tomorrow. I'm get on the road to go and be with my friend. I need to do a Periscope on friendship, man. So many of you are interviewing for new BFFs. I need to talk about friendship. Friendship is so important to me. And that's a testimony. My wife will tell you, I did not believe in that. I didn't think it was a part of my calling, man. I didn't think it was a part of my calling. But anyway, I'm a lot more delivered, and friends are important, and I'm going to preach for one of my friends tomorrow, and I'll be back for church Sunday, 8:30 and 11:30 at All Nations Worship Assembly of Chicago. It's going to be amazing. I'm in a new series called The Exit Strategy, and please don't miss out on church because you think I'm going to have a Women's Day message. Sorry. I don't really let holidays hijack my pulpit. So I don't preach the Easter Bunny, and when it's Christmas time, the little elves and the dwarves don't hijack my pulpit. I still preach. So I'll probably do something nice for the women on Sunday, but I'm going to preach like I'm going to preach. And I got a great word, part 2 of the exit strategy, and it's going to really bless you. Good. SMP winner, come back. So come visit me. Check us out. All Nations Worship Assembly, 6028 South Champlain, and it's going to be amazing. And please, those of you that actually like me, keep us in prayer. We are remodeling our building for the next 8 to 9 weeks, and it's a lot of work, but I believe that with your help and with your prayers and with your support, we can get it done. I love you guys so very much. Review this above all of the freezing, and you'll get some principles out of it anyway. But I bid you peace. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.